Is it embarrassing?
Totally.
I think we're in good company with everyone.
Yeah. Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Today, we are going to be talking about dating and what we make things mean when we're starting to date somebody, the meaning making we all engage in. And I think we got some embarrassing stories for you, so that's fun. But first, we are going to do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other in this podcast.
All right. So just going off of intuition on what to share with you today, let's again find your anchoring spot. So is that going to be your feet on the ground? Maybe it's your butt in the chair. Maybe it's something else. And when you feel that connection, just pausing there and staying there for a full inhale and exhale. And I have placed my hands on the small of my back, sort of where my kidneys would be. That always feels like a tender spot. It feels nice to feel support. You could do that or place your hands anywhere else where it feels comforting. And when you're ready, we're going to open your eyes if you have your eyes closed. And I'm going to walk us through using a little prompt. Walk us through acquainting to our environment. Okay, so Stephanie has no idea what the prompt is going to be, so it's a surprise for her too. I would love for you to feel your feet on the ground and use this prompt. The reality is, I want you to look around your space right now and finish that prompt with something that's factual, like you see evidence of it. So for example, for me, I'm feeling my feet on the ground. The reality is there's a bottle of essential oils on my windowsill. And I'm going to say that and be there with this fact for a moment, for a full breath.
Okay.
And we'll turn and face another direction in your space. This time you could bring the attention to your butt on the seat if you're sitting on something. Or maybe your hands are touching something. And you're going to use this prompt again. The reality is. And just finish that sentence with something you see evidence of.
The reality is, I am a magician.
Okay.
There are a lot of magical implements and symbols in this room.
Yeah. What can you tell us the reality is one of those symbols that I see in the room right now is?
One of the symbols I see in the room right now is called a sigillum Dei Ameth, which is a lot of, there's Hebrew symbology and various mystical properties contained in this very detailed symbol.
Right. Okay, great. And we'll do this one more time. So turn and find something else in your space to look at and use the prompt. This time, maybe give your hands a squeeze or you want to notice your breath. Use the prompt again. The reality is. So I'm just like really faced with this reality right now. I'm looking at my fridge. The reality is my fridge is white.
Yes. I was just looking at curtains and thinking the reality is these curtains are white.
Okay. Right. I think it's going to become apparent during the course of this episode why I chose.
Yeah. Thank you. If only I'd had this simple tool previously in my life.
So this is a tool that is so valuable. The prompt, the reality is,
Wow.
and to be connected to your body and to be really using your eyes. Right now we're using our eyes, but you could be using your other senses as well. But learning to collect the evidence that's in front of your face.
That is so important. So I'm thinking to this story that I'm going to tell, and if I had just noticed what was there instead of making meaning out of what I saw, I mean, actually, I don't know if I'd know you today, and that makes me sad. So I'm glad I did it then, but in the future, making less meaning, observing more reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. All right. Thank you for that. It sounds so simple, but, simple is really important. Nothing to be sneezed at. Wow. So we're going to talk today about what we make things mean when we've started dating somebody, when we're hopeful about potentially finding a partner, when we're trying to imagine how we might fit into their lives and they might fit into ours. It's the square peg in the round hole sometimes, but we make a lot of meaning.
This topic brings up so much sensation in my body that I have my hand on the desk bracing me because I just want to burst out laughing.
Oh my God. Yeah, you've got a really good example.
And, Stephanie's talking about how we're going to speak to these issues or happenings in dating. I think it happens also in relationship, right? Established relationships happens as long as you're human, it happens. But it also happens like when you're meeting new friends or people who could potentially be new friends, could potentially be new business partners. Like anytime you're establishing a new relationship, I think it has the tendency to happen more so than, when a relationship is more established. But it's good in so many situations to remember this prompt. The reality is.
Yeah, definitely. As we're talking, I'm realizing that these bits of reality that I was not clearly observing, they all come up. The meaning maker goes when something is awry, when something's amiss. I'm not making meaning out of things if everything's just fine and feels good. I may be enjoying that. But when something makes you go, or like tweaks your reality a little bit, that's when you have to fold it into your category system meaning maker in the brain and make it make sense.
Right. And we're always trying to make things make sense. That's something we're wired up to do for our survival. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just noticing how it's working for us. Right. And I like that you distinguish between when something feels off and what kind of meaning making I can get into to sort of try to reassure myself that things are okay. And I also had an old tendency when things didn't necessarily, I think, feel off. I think I was just meaning making all the time.
Right.
But I do know the difference in feeling, right? The feeling I was trying to avoid when I'm like, ooh, that doesn't look good or feel good. Got to come up with something that makes this make more sense and feel better.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you're wanting a relationship or when you've got ideas about a person, wow, have I led myself astray with my meaning maker and my hopes for relationship or my ideas that a man was a certain way. Like, we are fitting this square peg into this round hole. I can make this hole bigger.
Let me get out the drill.
Right? Horrible puns laid into that.
Yes. And it is, for me, I think the examples that we shared today, they're so rooted in this desire for connection. Maybe the desire to have found the one, the desire to feel like, oh, I finally chose someone good for me. It's really so well and sweetly intentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I think when we're not really aware of how our meaning making, what it's doing, it can, like you say, like really lead us to some not great places.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, shall I give my little car example here?
Yeah, go for it.
You know, so I, many years ago, reconnected with a guy I had dated when I was 14. And so I had all kinds of ideas, and he had all kinds of ideas, and we hadn't actually spoken in 10 years, yet our ideas about each other persisted and were probably made worse by viewing each other's Facebook activity, which of course we make meaning out of these things all the time, right? So I decided he was whatever, he decided I was whatever, whatever. Oh God, he picked me up in a car.
I just never stop laughing at it.
Real are just wow. So this car was like full of crap. Like there was just crap everywhere, all over the floor. Like whatever. I don't particularly care about the amount of crap in a car. But I made, even in that instant, I made it mean a few things. Like, oh, he's really relaxed about his car. Like, oh, he doesn't even care because he can probably afford so many cars. Like, I don't even know where my mind went at that point because I was interrupted by the fact that this car was his ex-girlfriend's car. So that immediately the meaning maker switched to, she's the dirty pig, not him, right? It went from being like, actually, I don't mind this at all, to being like, I do mind it, but it's not his problem, it's hers. And also, wow, their relationship must be so great that they're still this car. I was wrong. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. And so those were some of the ideas I had. And the reality was that he couldn't really afford anything. He couldn't afford to insure his own car. He would happily use everybody else's resources. He would eventually take over my car also. A bunch of things that had nothing to do with a loving, generous, sharing relationship.
Wow. So how long do you imagine it took you to start seeing the reality more clearly?
Probably 6 months in.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him actually asking me in a really loving way, like, hey, do you think you could imagine this being your life? And as my brain remembered the first night sleeping in his home, thinking, I'm going to lose my mind if I have to sleep here ever again. There were so many noises. There were so many weird interruptions. He got up 8 times a night. But later when we were in love and he asked, could this be your life? I'm like, oh my God, babe, for sure. Like, absolutely, I can imagine this. And then part of my brain is also going, if this or that changes and maybe I could have that bedroom and not have to sleep beside you and like all this other. But yes, definitely.
And did you say the other part out loud to him ever?
No, I don't think I was even aware of it at the time.
Okay.
It's just parts of my brain running on autopilot. Yeah.
Right.
I will make this work no matter what. I love this man.
Oh, I felt that. I have thought that so many times in relationship. I will make this work no matter what.
I will make this work. Yeah. I need to share the cleaning thing also immediately. Because this was pretty soon in. This was like maybe a couple of weeks in. I arrived at his place and he answered the door naked and he was cleaning the house and he was on mushrooms. And what I made that mean was, wow, what a fun free spirit who likes a clean house. And all of those things might be true. And the reality is none of those things were true at the same time. You didn't value a clean house. You had a very intense weekly sort of what I think of as a lunatic cleaning operation, and the rest of the week was actively, purposefully very messy, because the one day a week you would pour 2 bottles of bleach all over the house and ruin all the towels with bleach, and needing to be, I mean, naked cleaning, okay. I love a good naked episode, but I didn't anticipate, I hadn't seen him naked up to that point, So I didn't realize that this one naked moment, which I thought was like a fun Sunday, did some mushrooms activity, was actually more of a regular lifestyle that would emerge.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you imagine you would have done differently had you saw that reality earlier?
Oof. I mean, the Steph of today can feel the difference from the initial reconnecting messages that we exchanged over Facebook. And I would not have, like, his first message to me, I would have been like, oh, this person has some mental health issues and is looking for support, or needs support, not a girlfriend.
Right. So that was also the reality is, if you would have read those same messages now with the lens that you have now, with the like embodied way of living that you have practiced, you would have taken something completely different out of those messages.
Yeah. And there's, I think, a really important energetic piece there. And it's this felt sense of things, right? It's because I can feel what feels good in my body. I can feel what energies are safe and good and consistent, or erratic and volatile. And all of those icky energy feelings that I paired with words that were said that made sense, or meaning making in my own mind that made things make sense. All of those factual things that you can hear and see and feel and touch, they ignore that energetic component, which is the super important, that embodied sense of what feels good and what feels bad.
Right. And like, what's fascinating, like as I'm listening to you talk, is the felt sense is so important to get connected to, right? The body sense that this is off. However, for so many of us, we're so disconnected from that body sense. We might feel and sense and notice discomfort and sensation, but I don't think we've spent the time getting to know and coming into relationship with those sensations to really get what it's trying to tell us, right? And what's working for us and what isn't working for us. And so what I noticed for me is, in order to get to a place where I now have a really well-developed felt sense and I trust it and I use it to guide me, I had to practice using those concrete things. What can I see? What can I hear? What can I touch? What's actually in front of my face that I don't look at because I'm in my mind creating a story to help make the situation or this person look better or feel better.
Yeah, totally. And, I want to say too that there's that pendulum swing that happens too, and we're discovering what the felt sense is for us. When something felt worse, this new not great feeling is better than that old worse feeling. And that's all part of it too, right? There's no just getting to the end point here. It's this process of learning and feeling and discovering what feels good and what feels bad by living through things that feel good and feel bad.
Yeah, it's a willingness to let go of an old way of being to try on a feeling kind of way of living. And only through trying it do we really get to know it, that system.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I also had a partner once who was, in my limited experience, very gregarious and social. Social is a word I would have used. And it turns out that actually what was happening was incredible social anxiety and like complete disconnect. So when I was experiencing gregarious joy, what was happening internally was actually like a total shutdown, didn't even want to be there, would have rather stayed home.
Mm-hmm. And, someone can put on that facade, right? And we're sort of taking it for what we see and what we feel. Would you have said there were other signs, the other realities that were showing you what was really happening behind the scenes?
With this person, I don't think actually there was enough time spent together to have any idea of what would have been going on behind the scenes, but I didn't need any evidence. Gee, I had my stories.
And the thing is, like, this is not about what someone shows you is false and we can never take it for what we're seeing in the moment. But I like to remind myself of, let's take some time. Let's take some time to observe this pattern. Is it the same all the time? Does it change? Was this a one-off Sunday naked clean where 2 bottles of bleach are all over the floor? If we give ourselves time, we're going to see these things if we are awake and paying attention.
The time is the ingredient that cannot be ignored. If you met me at any given time, you have all kinds of ideas about me that will absolutely change in 3 months. I am a very changeable person. What's super on for me right now will not be what's on for me in a few months, and on it goes.
And, I think you have a very fast pace in how you change, and what's exciting you from time to time. But we're always changing, right, as people. And I think the willingness to give ourselves time to get to know someone, give ourselves time to get to know how our body feels in connection with someone before we make all these energetic, emotional, and like practical commitments to them.
Yes.
And marry them in our mind right away on, the second you saw him open that door.
Christ. Well,
Because
there's
he's so fun.
Yeah, so it's so much fun. Holy crap. Yeah. There's also some unfortunate like financial realities for people in modern day times. And a lot of people I think are making choices based on what they can afford, where they can afford to live, how they might want to do things. Like people partner up because they need to be able to afford an apartment. There's all kinds of reasons that we get together with people and stay with them.
Yep. That
time.
I feel like that could be a whole other podcast episode. Reason why we choose people and why we stay. Why do we stay when our needs are not being met on a consistent basis?
In terms
Huge
of
topic.
the element of time, when you're feeling like there's a rush, there isn't. The only way you can know what's up is giving it time, which might be hard sometimes.
I was just talking to someone recently about that rush feeling. When you feel like you have to make a quick decision about whether this relationship is a go or not a go, that to me feels like a sign. Like whether we enter into partnership with someone, like we are all lucky enough, like you and I'm assuming the people, you're listening to us. I assume you have a certain level of privilege, right? That we are not in the situation where we are in desperate need to partner up with someone for our pure survival. So when we're talking from that place, I don't think there ever needs to, if I feel panicked to make a decision about whether I'm going to choose to be with someone or not, something tells me something's off. Right? What I know now is that it can take time. And it's good that it takes time to let yourself make those choices more intentionally from a place that's not driven by fear and panic.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at your old self and you just want to give them a great big squish.
Yeah. Such a sweetie. Sweet little Steph. Didn't know. Was so hopeful.
So hopeful.
Yeah.
I remember feeling hopeful.
Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah. Is now a good time to share my hopeful story?
I'm already grinning about it. Yes. Share your story.
Oh my gosh. I was sharing with Steph not that long ago this realization that I had. We were talking about the stories we make up in our mind about people. And I realized this is probably the story of all stories. I don't know if I will ever be the creator of a story more magnificent and wild than this one, and how incongruent it was with reality. And it's dark, it's sad. Because it's so dark and sad, it almost highlights it even more, like the power of our mind and what we make things mean and how off we can be.
Yeah, I want to say up front that our laughter is not about the subject matter itself. It's the irony and the meaning making being so incongruent is a great word for that.
Yeah, and I think we laughed so hard about it because of the irony, right? Absolutely not because of the substance of the story and what was happening. You know, there's deep respect for people and their life experiences and tough, tragic, traumatizing times. And at the same time, having lived through that with someone, it made me realize, like, wow, I sure made that mean something that was so inaccurate. And like, not just made it mean something that was so inaccurate for the moment, but like lived by that inaccuracy, fed by it for so long, for like over a year before I found out the truth. And when I found out the truth, I was like in shock, like exactly that. Yeah. And I have hesitated to share this story because it has such a personal element to it. And it has a really tender and sad element to it. And I don't want it taken out of context. I don't want it to be disrespectful to any person and their life experience. And the reason I'm choosing to share it is because I feel like it illustrates so well how we get ourselves into trouble when we make things mean all sorts of stuff. Right? So I really hope that's clear.
I think it's clear. I'm snorting over here.
Okay. So, and I know that he would be howling if he were here today to be able to hear this episode.
Yeah.
He would laugh so hard with us. Yeah. So from that place, I'm willing to share, from the place that he was such a, like, he wanted people to have the opportunity to heal and grow. All right, that was a big passion of his. So if this story can help you, it will be in honor of him.
Yeah.
So I met this man, and I remember we were just getting to know each other. And he was telling me he was taking the SkyTrain to work. The SkyTrain is, our local public transportation. And I thought, wow, how cool. Like an environmentally conscious man choosing to get up earlier and take the SkyTrain to work. And I let that live in my mind for a long time, and it created some extra positive regard for the person. And honestly, it wasn't until I'm watching Stephanie laugh, and it's really hard to not laugh. It wasn't until, I would say, 2.5 years after he passed away that I made this connection of this wild, wild story that I had made up in my mind about him based on this one thing he told me about riding the SkyTrain to work. So yeah, I thought all these wonderful things about him. And the sad, sad reality is that there was a reason he didn't have access to a car. And it was a tragic reason. It was a really sad reason and a really traumatic reason, really. And it really highlighted, I think, how much he was struggling with his mental health. So here I was making up this story about this man I had just met, thinking, what a wonderful dude, so climate conscious. And I mean, maybe he was, but I didn't actually notice any of that in our relationship because shortly thereafter he got a car. But it was, what I had made up was so, so, so incredibly far from the truth. And the reality is, had I had, and this is another thing I found myself doing, trying to self-protect and protect my image of the other person, wanting them to be good and the right person. If I had asked anything more about this transit taking and why he didn't have a car, I don't know if he would have told me right away, but like there would have been a different kind of exchange between us. Maybe he wouldn't have been honest. I don't know. But because I never asked, I went on for a whole year not finding out something that would have changed whether I chose to be in that relationship or not from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, the darkly comedic element was left out of the story, so my laughter probably just looks insane. That's okay. You've now reminded me of 90 Day Fiancé.
Okay.
There's a couple, the question asking at the beginning, which I think is a really important one because maybe we don't want to ruffle feathers or we don't want to look needy or we don't want to look some kind of way, which leads us to not have information. This couple on 90 Day Fiancé, she lives in the States, he lives in South Africa. She imagines he can just come to America. Why wouldn't he just come to America? It's obviously better for whatever reasons they've decided. And in 2 weeks now, it's been 2 years, and in 2 weeks, we're going to get married. Now's the time to talk to an immigration lawyer and to bring up the fact that this man has various charges against him that she hasn't asked questions about. So she says to the immigration lawyer, well, will these charges, make a difference? And he's like, well, what are the charges? And she's like, something maybe about robbery or something. Oh, well, was it armed? Or, he's got questions. He's asking all the questions that she could have asked at the beginning. But now she's got this whole life trajectory going. She has to move to South Africa instead of him coming. Like, so many things happened as a result of those questions not being asked at the beginning.
This is, I think, a really significant thing to just give some attention to, is for you who's listening to notice When have you been too afraid to ask the question because you're afraid to know what the answer was? Right? And do you remember that time distinctly? Was it a body feeling you had? How did you distract yourself and move on from that? What tool did you use? What did you tell yourself to say you don't have to ask about that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I remember distinctly in this relationship moments where I didn't ask. And I think it was partly fueled by fear to know, and partly, and this is truthful, but maybe not well refined yet at the time in me, was like trusting a man to tell me what he believes is necessary for me to know based on the level of our connection. Right? I want to trust someone that they will want to self-disclose things that they think are relevant to our choice to be together, and that I am meant to be privy to this information so that I can make a well-informed choice of whether I want to be in this relationship or not. A big part of me wanted to really live in accordance to that. Mm-hmm. That I don't want to go digging for information from someone. Like, that doesn't feel good to me. Yeah. And at the same time, I think I could have been more proactive to ask certain questions that would have either given me much clearer information or shown me this person's discomfort in talking about the reality, which would have also been good information.
Yeah, that's really important. Totally. And that's an extra interesting self-reflection piece, because you're a person who asks questions. Like, you're very curious. You're always asking questions. I am the opposite of that. Like, I very rarely have any questions. So if you notice yourself changing the way that you are, if you're naturally curious question asker and you notice that you're kind of not doing that, or if, like me, yourself, you're not the kind of person who's going to ask questions. Instead, you're just going to make piles of sweeping assumptions. Maybe it's a good time to tap into the old curiosity machine and work to get to know somebody and how they show up.
Yeah. And also, like, that's the sweetest time. Like, I love getting to know people. It's such a fun time. Mm. And what I notice is if I'm too committed to who I think this person is, or who I assume them to be, or who I want them to be in my life, that curiosity phase is no longer true wonder and curiosity. That's like, can I collect evidence and bend it in all the ways to make it match how I want you to be?
Ooh, I'm so good at that. Very forceful. Yeah. And there's another aspect of that too, which is the acceptance. Like, this is a totally different track. It's on the other side. The acceptance of when someone who is a good match for you and you love them and you've discovered all these wonderful things about each other, it's a great fit, and then something comes up that isn't. Like, how do you fold that reality that you've discovered in without just throwing the baby out with the bathwater? There's so many angles to this meaning making. It comes up at every stage constantly.
And I think that's why it's important to be aware of our meaning making and cultivate a connection where there's freedom and a welcoming to share what we are making things mean and check them out with each other. Mm-hmm. And it can actually be a really fun thing that you build into your relationship, to see all the wild places that your minds go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what am I making this mean? That's the thing that's really constantly running through my mind, and I'm often sharing with people, like, oh, when you said this thing, I made it mean this, that, and the other thing,
Yes.
It's a really good exercise for sure.
I really liked that element of our friendship. And I think you and I are really blessed to have a community of friends who live this way. And it's quite nice knowing that you have a large collection of people. I don't think I want to talk about people as a collection, but a large group of people, friends who we feel very free to say, oh, you just said this, you did that, or you looked at me this way and I made it mean this. Like, how off was I,
Yeah.
And that you can all have a good laugh together. And sometimes maybe it's accurate, but more often than not, it's wild and wacky.
Yeah. That it's a hoot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found with when I have had the courage to have those conversations, like sometimes it's in the moment, like fun loving, oh my gosh, I made it mean this. And other times it's a real conscious and intentional, like, hey, can we come back and revisit together? Like, can we come back and chat through something? Because I just want to check, I made these things mean something. Help me understand. Am I on the right track? Am I off? And I have found that when I have had the courage to have those kinds of conversations with people, it really deepens the connection. It helps me understand and see them so much better and vice versa. And it takes the connection to a whole new level, right? You almost create a certain kind of safety when you're willing to initiate that kind of conversation. And if someone is willing to dive into that kind of conversation with you, you create a type of connection that is unique and rare and the most fulfilling kind, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is why the self-knowledge is so important, like that sort of awful idea that is untrue that you have to love yourself in order for somebody to love you. These words are horribly misconstrued. What this means is that you might not recognize love that's being shown to you if you don't have that sort of love for yourself, if you haven't experienced love in those ways. The same thing holds true with this self-knowledge and meaning making. If I'm coming to you and saying, hey, I just had this experience and I'm making it mean all these things, and you don't know yourself enough to have any clue that you were making anything mean anything, then we can't really meet there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when two people can meet there, it's glorious. It's also so like permission giving. And what I noticed happen is I stopped taking things so personally because I was familiar with my meaning making machine.
Mm-hmm.
And then so in knowing I had such a strong meaning maker and the fears that drove it, I could then imagine the people I'm in connection with having just as strong of a meaning maker with their own fears attached to it. And one, I stopped taking things so personally when people would like make assumptions. But two, I also took less responsibility to make everything okay for other people because some of the stuff I'm like, that's just not reality, man. You're making that mean something and bless your heart. And it's not accurate, and I'm happy to chat with you about it, but I'm not going to take that on as my role to convince you otherwise if you're not open to seeing it a different way.
Yeah. The making it impersonal is a really powerful tool because it really isn't personal. People are most often thinking about themselves, not other people. I remember a woman from one of our groups called me once. She'd just met someone. And she was in that, there's a period of 4 days after you have a sexual interaction with somebody where your hormones are going bonkers, your connective desires, for women often it's more, and for men often it's less. So that you get this weird 4-day period where things are weird. And her meaning maker was going bonkers. And I had to remind her that her meaning maker had been hijacked by this hormone that was going to be around for 4 days. So I'm like, whoever's at the front desk of your reality right now should not be trusted in any way. Don't make phone calls they suggest you should make. Don't attach any meaning to whatever they're telling you is happening right now, because you've been hijacked, you know?
Yeah.
And if we're not giving attention to our meaning makers, they have been hijacked by previous conditioning and by all of the fears that we have about ourselves and the world.
Completely. Yeah. So that's why I like using the prompt. The reality is I like using the prompt. I'm making this mean. I think Brene Brown uses the prompt. The story I'm making up about this is.
Yeah. She's got a
Right.
beautiful story about swimming with her husband. And
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And we're so quick to make things mean that we're not lovable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the big one, right? And then we defend ourselves accordingly.
Yeah, and like we make things mean I'm not lovable. I know I've made things mean about the other person that they're like perfect and fantastic. I've also made them mean you're terrible and horrible, you know, and then everything else in between.
Yeah, for sure. The easiest sentence that we utter all the time is just, oh, they're crazy. They're just crazy. Or they must be on drugs. It's like, okay, so something isn't making sense in my reality and I'm making it entirely about the other person and their behaviors.
Yeah. I've been really liking, and it's been dedicated practice for me to grow this skill of please help me understand. Right? Please help me make sense of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from this place, this energy of I would be grateful if, and I'm curious about.
Mm-hmm.
And this desire to understand you and see you. But man, when you grow up in a home where everything is about finger pointing and blaming, it takes work to grow that muscle of please help me understand. I'd love to understand better. Please help me.
Yeah. You know, that reminds me of, do you remember the books, The Babysitter's Club?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the like tools of the trade for the babysitters was when a kid you're babysitting presents you with a piece of art they've made and you've got no idea what it is or what it's supposed to be. What you're to say to them is, oh, tell me more about this. And really that's the sentiment, you know, loving curiosity.
Loving curiosity. Yeah. And I remember actually recently we were at our favorite glorious little vacation spot. And I'm like trying to remember what the topic we were talking. And I was feeling so emotional that night and just bawling my eyes out. And you listened just so beautifully and patiently. And you did this thing several times that I noticed at the moment when you were doing it, how nice it felt in my body. But I also know that's been a thing that has felt hard and vulnerable sometimes for me to offer to other people. And what you said to me was something like, you know, is there anything else you want me to know? Or something along the lines of tell me more. Or what else do you want me to know or understand or see? And it's such a beautiful way to be received and invited by someone, welcomed by someone to share more, right? Because I think sometimes when we're already feeling vulnerable, we might want to hold ourselves back from really expressing because it's tender, right? And to let that first burst out and share can feel scary. And then you have this sort of vulnerability hangover thing happening right in the moment of, oh my gosh, I just told her all that and like let her see my blubbering face. And I don't really have that with you to the same degree that I might with a stranger or someone new, but still I'm human. And, you know, there's some element of that in the moment. And when you ask me those questions, you know, is there anything else you want me to know about this? Is there anything else you want me to, or you want to say or share? I was like, oh, that's permission to like check in, like to see maybe there's more that I wouldn't have checked in with had you not asked that question. And it was this permission to like unload the next bunch of stuff until it was really out of my system. And it reminds me of those times where we comfort a child who's having a tantrum and we allow them to have their tears. And we sort of check in, like, is there more? Is that it? Are you good to go? And we don't push them off our lap, but we really wait for that sign that it's like out of their system. And you sat with me in such a beautiful way that night. And I really remember that and I appreciate that.
It's so nice. Good. I'm glad. It's really hard. I think feelings, very few people are good at feelings or just comfortable with feelings. And I think for most of us, feelings come as an outburst when we can't hold it anymore, which then in our experience often leads to people responding in some unfavorable way or wanting you to be different or unloading their own set of feelings. Great, it's feelings unloading time. Everybody pile on. Just being seen and received is a very unusual feeling for most of us who are expressing hard things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was really lovely.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. And then our friend came and gave us cookies.
Oh, it's the best place in the world. Yeah. Thanks, Jack.
That was the best. That was such a tender moment too, like when Jack came over, because it was this acknowledgement. And I love the way he like stuck out his arm and like was like turned the other way, sort of like, I want to give you privacy, but I sense that there's some tenderness here and I just want to show my care for you both.
Yeah.
And it was really delightful, like just so lovely. And what it reminds me of is how we can show our care and still honor people's space.
Yeah.
Right. And respect their space and respect their timing and respect that they might not want to talk to you about it or want to talk about it right then and there with you. And there's still opportunities for you to show your care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. Okay, we are in the weeds, babe. I suggest we wind this up. Have you got a body practice in mind? We're going to talk a lot more about dating and relationships.
Right.
We're going to talk about pacing, and we're going to talk about reclaiming parts of ourselves that our past partners that drove us crazy. Those are reflections.
Yeah.
And then also the grief of love, the grief of change and love and connection and fear and all of these many things. Actually, before we do the connection practice, do you want to say a couple of words about priming the body for peace?
Oh, excited.
Yeah.
So Steph and I love to create and to think about how we can help the world become a better place. And we have this way of doing things that these ideas tend to come up when we're kayaking or paddleboarding. And recently that happened. And we found a way. We found a way of how we can share these unique, simple, powerful tools to help you prime your body for peace. So many of us say we want a peaceful life, yet we are wired and conditioned for stress and chaos. Not because we want to be, but because it's familiar. So we are tinkering around in the background behind the scenes right now, creating an amazing program for you to help you learn the skills to build into your everyday life a way of helping your body find comfort and safety and peace so that you can start making choices in your life that grow more peace.
One of those will be noticing the reality that's in front of us, slowing down the meaning maker. And these are skills that you employ these things constantly until they become part of your repertoire and second nature. So in this course, there'll be all the work that you can do and all of the wonderful info that we're going to include as part of the course, but also the live calls for practice are really the thing we're rewiring, and it's a process, and your nature can become different than it is. I feel like really completely different than when I began this work. My body feels different. My mind feels different. My relationships feel different.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And if someone had told me, and I worked so hard for it. That's what I want to say. And I'm happy to have you work less hard and share with you the things that have helped me, that have helped Stephanie, that have helped so many people. And I'm excited. I'm excited because I really think it's going to change lives for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think the fact that we have these such different ways, like you're a more gentle, yeah, let's try this out. And I'm like this skeptical, I'm not sure about that sort of thing. Like, I think we really run the gamut on different ways that people can interpret things. And for us to both have been able to use these tools for ourselves and for the many, many people we've worked with using these tools, and for it to be so impactful is significant. So yeah, I'm excited to share.
Like what I've noticed, and sort of blew my mind, because I'd say we've worked with a lot of women, right? We've worked with men too. But especially recently, to hear from men and hear from also people who are in their 70s and 80s say, holy, what is happening here? How do these things work so well? Why do I not know them already?
Right.
That actually probably, I don't know if shocked is the right word, because it makes sense to me why they work, and they don't discriminate against people, these tools. But it's been such a joy for me to see how well they work for everybody who's been open-minded and hearted enough to give it a try.
Yeah, totally. I ran some of these tools past. We've talked about my friend who's very direct and blunt and not into any of this cheesy bullshit, and she's recently realized that she might run a little bit of anxiety. And so I was like, well, can I walk you through this tool? And she did it. And then she said, I feel better. Yeah. That's why we're here.
Totally. Yeah. So that's coming. Priming your body for peace.
Yeah. Coming soon. We'll advertise. Okay. Body practice.
Body practice. Let's go with I'm watching you.
Oh.
Let's go with what you're doing.
Okay.
Do you want to describe it?
Sure. I have my arms outstretched and I am rotating my torso.
I like to call it helicopter arms.
Helicopter arms, wee!
And if you do this and think about helicopter arms, and you can add in the sound effects of wee, like Steph did. Or other sound effects to your desire, it's hard not to laugh. Right? And there we've already just very quickly changed our nervous system state.
Oh, fabulous.
Fly us away, Steph.
Amazing. Oh, thanks, Chief. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, please follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share it with somebody you care about. We'll see you next week.
Bye.